This might be a bit of a hot take. Out of every character in Genshin Impact, the most useful one you get right out of the gate that gives you the most bang for your buck is Barbara.
I'll take care of it.
Now, hear me out. As a fan of idols, Barbara's the kind of character that I'm the least normal about, and I don't think I've ever explicitly said how much I love her on this channel. There were signs though. In Genshin, Barbara is the deaconess of the Church of Favonius. She's loved by Mondstadt's citizens because of her ability to heal through song, quickly becoming their idol. Maybe a bit too loved though. Let's just get rid of Albert. Barbara's a ray of sunshine. She's a bit of a weirdo and is the kind of character that makes me genuinely happy just by seeing and hearing her. I especially like how they incorporated the idol bit of her character into her kit. Barb is an invaluable support character because she is the party cheerleader, keeping them healthy with her performance. She's got great out-of-the-box utility with very little investment too. Because of this, Barbara's been with me throughout every leg of my journey so far. So why is it that from the moment she joined my party, I was told she's bad and not worth using over everyone else? This is for a ton of reasons, but the largest one is that character viability is largely gauged by how useful they are in Genshin's endgame content, Spiral Abyss, which in turn forms its metagame. And for those who don't know what that means, the metagame refers to strategies or characters or even mechanics that the community decides are the most dominant in order to clear the game's hardest content. It just so happens that there isn't really that much endgame content in Genshin unless you like children's card games. While I do think Genshin's metagame is great for the game's longevity and community discussion, playing the game strictly for the meta has sucked the fun out of it for me. Big Twitter numbers, optimal rotations, and strong characters with finely tuned artifacts aren't the end all for me, and placing characters into good or bad boxes discourages new and old players from using characters they want or are excited for. I think the real fun from this game comes from the freedom to play and enjoy it however you want. My aim with this video is not to discourage players who enjoy this part of the game. I like some bits of the meta as well, but I mainly want to discuss why some characters get put into the dumpster over others, and how that perception tends to paint them in a negative light. Also, hi, I'm Joey. I like making videos on topics that interest me, much like this one, so if you like this Dragon Hustle channel and want to see more, consider engaging with this video if you liked it. So, without further ado, let's get right into today's topic. A lot of time in Genshin Impact will be spent exploring the overworld, solving puzzles and getting into skirmishes. During this exploration phase, players have the choice to slot in any characters they want into a party of 4. Each character is assigned a specific element, as well as having tools tailored to a specific role. Because elements and how they react with each other is the name of the game, your team of chemists will consist of characters that'll help you achieve the best results. Generally, you want to cycle through your party, passing the baton to each character to make sure that the team deals as much damage as possible. With this in mind, a team with good synergy will bring out the best in each other. So, what does that look like? For the sake of this example, let's go with a normal carry setup. You have a main carry and 3 support characters that help bring out the best in them. Teams usually focus on a specific kind of elemental reaction, with your point man enabling that reaction and your teammates helping apply and amplify the reaction's potency. Your main damage dealer, or your main DPS, is your character on point, or the person who spends the most time on the field dealing damage. A sub DPS usually has tools that allow them to take up less field time, supporting the main carry from the sidelines, but still contributing big damage. Shielder type characters help mitigate damage by creating barriers that protect your party, and they can also be refreshed when their cooldown is up. Lastly, healers are your white mages. They trade damage for sustain, patching up all your party damage. These are all very broad definitions for these roles, and they don't fit for every character in this game. These terms are also defined by the community. Character roles aren't as clear-cut from the get-go compared to traditional turn-based RPGs, especially in Genshin's case. Your sub-DPS can become your main DPS and vice versa. Your shielder can heal, or your healer can shield. Some characters have abilities that are great for traversal despite being suited for big damage. Why, yes, I will use this elemental skill to Skyrim climb up this hill. Some elements are also suited to a specific role and tend to get typecasted. Pyro and Cryo deal cartoonish damage, especially when you pair them together for the melt reactions. Hydro and Animo are great support elements, but are no slouch when it comes to bringing the pain, and so on. Flexible characters that grant you more utility tend to be a bit more favored, because they can contribute much more to your party. Quote-unquote meta characters contribute a lot to a party and can slot into most teams pretty easily. For example, Bennett can heal with his burst and increase your party attack tenfold. Shincho can get real motivated and use summon swords for some off-field action, and also help generate a ton of energy for the team. Xiangling can use her Beyblade to let it rip and constantly apply pyro and enable some big elemental reaction. These early game units are so overpowered and still so widely used that they help form the supportive backbone of pretty much any team. This goes doubly so for Genshin's endgame content, which requires a well-oiled machine of all types of units supporting each other equally to clear it as efficiently as possible. Because Genshin is relatively easy and adopts the "it can't kill me if I kill it first" mindset, some healers are considered to be the black sheep of a team comp. Bringing them along usually means sacrificing another party member who usually has more utility, meaning a loss in overall team damage. Shielders are actually considered much more valuable because most of them have tools that let them do more than just shield. Now that we've explored just how important team synergy is, I want to give sustained characters their flowers. Their job is much more valuable than people give them credit for. And to do this, let's talk more in depth about the different kinds of options that Genshin gives you when it comes to dealing with boo-boos. From the get-go, the player is given a starting lineup of characters that lack healing or shielding skills. This is so that the player can get a solid grip on the game mechanics, especially when it comes to patching up their party, at least until they roll the gacha. The most important thing to keep in mind is that Genshin doesn't discourage the player from picking one option over the other. The player quickly learns that dashing is going to be the easiest way to avoid incoming damage. While it does consume stamina, you have invincibility at the start of the animation, and it's going to be something you're going to be using for the whole game. Next are these big Ubisoft towers called the Statues of the Seven. The player can warp to them at almost any time to heal the whole party, and even revive fallen characters. Cooking is one of the main ways players will be patching up damage on the go. Players can hunt wild animals and gather other kinds of mats to make meals as long as they've got a pot and a fire going. Cooking also comes with other stat bonuses, and the game does encourage players to learn as many recipes as they can. To offset how potentially strong this could be, it does come with a set of drawbacks. A fullness meter prevents characters from eating too much and doesn't let you heal once it's full, just like real life. I personally don't like the fullness mechanic because there's no reliable way to tell how full a character is on the field, and it's very easy to accidentally eat a fatal hit in this game. This might be a bit of a skill issue, but I personally have trouble keeping track of myself when there's so many effects on the screen at once, so I find it very easy to accidentally lose a character. When a character's down, they can be revived with a food item, but once you do use that, it's on a pretty lengthy cooldown, so you get slapped on the wrist pretty hard for making mistakes. That being said though, cooking is still a fun option that people can use, and collecting recipes is kind of a minigame in and of itself. Outside of these options, the player has a few more tools in their kit. This is where sustained characters come in, namely shielders and healers. The first character that players will have access to that can do both is Noelle. You can get her from the Beginner's Wish banner, and it does feel like she was put here to give players that extra option. Noelle teaches the player the importance of bringing a sustained character on your team, and having a unit like that from the get-go is extremely helpful. Beginners also get access to Barbara! Like I said before, you can get her completely for free, and her use in the early game cannot be overstated. Because you'll be exploring a bunch and getting into all sorts of trouble, Barbara can quickly become the team anchor. She won't block out damage with the shield, but she can heal the fielded character with her skill and the entire party with her burst. This is especially helpful in early game domains in which the player can only heal with food or a sustained character. This is the kind of comfort that I naturally gravitated to, and I personally went with the healer route when it came to sustaining my party. As if it were written in the stars, Jean would be my first 5-star because I ended up losing the 50-50 on the Yoimiya banner. She's a standard banner character that can heal and flex into a sub DPS. I also personally think she is the best 5-star starter character a new player can get in the early game. Together with these two and whoever the heck I wanted in my party, I ended up steamrolling most of the in-game content. I didn't feel like I was having a hard time because I'd invested into healers so early on. In fact, I didn't really use any other kinds of support characters and I was still fine. Eventually, I did invest into shielders and other popular options, but I never once regretted picking Barbara, even when people told me that I would. This is because any character can be useful in the overworld, especially ones that are specifically designed to keep you alive. Even though I've given healers their flowers, why is it that they're the role that tends to be the most neglected? Truthfully, I think their use does tend to fall off from mid to late game. When the player gets access to more characters with interesting functions and more tools in their kit, it gets a little harder to justify running a solo healer, especially when those premium options tend to come with kits that make dedicated healers a little more redundant. On top of this, there are characters that are much more worthwhile to build in the early game that don't ever fall off. Characters like Bennett, Fischl, Xiangling, Shincho, and Sucrose are versatile and cheap to build. These characters are smart invests, and they can even be used in the hardest content that Genshin has to offer. Healers, with some exceptions, can't, especially if that's all they can do. That's why I feel like they get badmouthed, but nobody had it harder than Lady Kokomi. but I also think she's the greatest success story a character has ever seen. When Kokomi first came out, she received a ton of backlash due to her kit, which we'll take a closer look at. She's a Hydro 5-star that specializes in healing and does it extremely well. Kokomi can summon a jellyfish that heals the active party member and applies Hydro to whatever enemies are near it. Kokomi's burst doubles down on that healing as long as she's fielded and attacking. What makes her really unique, however, is her Ascension passive. With this skill, Kokomi trades away all of her critical hit rate in exchange for a healing bonus, which means that she's really only meant to heal. At least that's what her kit is suggesting. Because of this, there was some confusion into what her purpose on the team was, because her burst suggested that she might have wanted to be on field. I was playing the game at the time and can personally vouch that the common consensus that Kokomi was not really worth rolling for. Players were upset that a character with a role this restricted was released and were especially hung up on the fact that she couldn't crit. At most, she was seen as a very expensive upgrade to Barbara. I'm gonna get on a bit of a tangent here, but when Kokomi came out, I was kind of in that bandwagon of, I don't want to roll for this character, especially if she's power creeping Barbara. Like, I turned my nose up and I was like, ew, Kokomi. I play a lot of games that deal with power creep pretty poorly, especially Fire Emblem Heroes. Characters get power creep like every couple weeks or so. So to me, I felt like I was being personally insulted when they released a character that does what my favorite character does, but better. Now that I'm way further into the game and kind of understand how Hoyoverse tends to power scale their characters, I think I appreciate Kokomi a lot more. Even if characters have the same kind of weapon and the role, they do different things and have their own strengths over each other. And when the time finally came where I felt like it was a good time to roll for Kokomi, I got her and I still use her. She's great. It didn't help Kokomi's case that she was released to a very numbers heavy meta and came out right after Raiden Shogun's banner, which was the best selling banner in the game at that point. So it did feel like Kokomi was pretty much doomed for the start, seemingly sent out to die, but it wouldn't stay that way forever. After Kokomi's run ended, more and more players began to discover just how potent she really was. Because Kokomi was gifted in applying Hydro, she was a linchpin to a ton of powerful team comps. You could park her jellyfish, swap off, and watch it apply Hydro over a massive radius. If you want to use Kokomi as an on-fielder, she can patch your party up with her burst and also drive elemental reactions like Electro Charge and Freeze. Once players found out just how useful she was in those team comps, they quickly changed their tune. Shortly after her release, an artifact set called Ocean Hued Clam was also released. It's an artifact set that actually ended up indirectly buffing her and also other healers. Basically what it does is that when a character's healed, it charges this little bubble that pops and deals some extra damage. This made healers much more valuable in a team, and with the addition of enemies that also ignore shields to do bleed damage directly to your character, healer stonks were on the rise, baby. This wasn't the only indirect buff that Kokomi would get, and she'd only continue to blossom as time went on. When Dendro dropped in 3.0, all Hydro and Electro units saw new life. Hydro units especially, because they were the key to the potent Bloom and Hyper Bloom reactions. It can't be overstated just how strong those reactions are too. With this, Kokomi's popularity skyrocketed. She was the premier Hydro driver in a lot of Dendro teams and even got a new artifact side grade in Gilded Dreams. Kokomi saw the biggest glow up of any Genshin character in my opinion. But what does Kokomi tell us about Genshin's character design? Because characters are never directly buffed with the exception of just one so far, we can expect characters to be released in a quote-unquote complete state. Even if it seems like their use won't be clear from the get-go, it's entirely possible that they might come into their own much later, or maybe they were always good and we didn't realize it at the time. Kokomi isn't the only character to get this treatment and is the shining example of a late bloomer. A common thing I've noticed in Genshin is that characters are all released with its future in mind. New characters are built to bring out the best in certain roles and playstyles and in turn, age like a fine wine. Whatever Hoyoverse is cooking with certain characters isn't super clear sometimes and it might look like we need to kick them the hell out of the kitchen. But I say, let them cook. Characters do not get directly buffed in this game. What I mean by this is that there are no balance updates to Genshin to upgrade or change character kits in response to community feedback. At most, new artifacts released that work well with new and old characters, indirectly buffing them. There could also be some support characters that increase the value of specific characters. Zhongli is the only exception to this scenario, because he's the only character who is directly buffed in response to a perceived power level. But since then, nothing like that has really happened. But I feel like ever since Kokomi came out, there have been more new characters that have been released in a quote-unquote future-proof state. For example, let's look at Yaimiko. She's an Electro unit that summons turrets that constantly target enemies. She's also very pretty. Mwah. While she was a great Electro character and super popular in the fanbase, Players at the time felt that she had a lot of weird quirks that kind of held her back from being truly great. The biggest one being her Ascension passive that increased her turret damage based on her elemental mastery stat. Yae didn't really use EM, so this particular bit of her kit confused players, but Yae was released with Dendro in mind because Dendro loves EM. Yae's wonky passive now became really useful because she could now use artifacts with DPS and EM stats. Pair that with a new artifact side grade, again in Gilded Dreams, and Yae became a premium Electro slot in Dendro teams. You know what they say about hindsight, and this is going to start to sound very, very tired by the end of this video. On that topic too, I specifically remember Kuki Shinobu being thrown in a dumpster when she was released. Poor girl. Kuki is a 4-star healer first and foremost that scales off her HP stat to increase her healing potency. So why was it that she had an Ascension passive that increased her yada yada yada? Dendro. It's Dendro. By now, you can kind of guess how people feel about her, and this just continues to happen. Farina Defontaine made her debut and single-handedly increased the value of the healer slot with just her burst alone. I have never been more validated as a Barbara main in my life. Finally! I can heal myself! The existence of future-proofed characters means that we can't judge a character's power in a vacuum. It's very clear that every new unit, especially 5 stars, will continue to bring out the value of your existing lineup. And even if they don't right now, they will in the future. But I can't understand why people wouldn't want to buy into a promise like this. I talked at length about Genshin's gacha in my Eula video, and you can watch that one when you're done with this one, but rolling is really expensive. A new character alone can cost you in the triple digits if you're unlucky, maybe if you have no pity, or if you just keep losing that 50-50. Truthfully, no one wants to invest their time and money into a character that isn't worth those efforts. There's still some really niche characters that don't necessarily fit into any kind of roles, but the bright side is that there are no useless characters in this game, and their time will come. With this in mind, I'd like to discuss what kind of value a character can bring to the table, and the kind of conversations a player might be having with themselves, or maybe even their wallets. Up to bat is Cloud Retainer. This section was going to be about Wriothesley originally, but the nature of this topic is so flexible that you can slot in any character and still have it apply. I want to examine character worth through the lens of the newest 5-star, Shenyun, not only because I'm madly in love with her, but I would also like to explore why she is such an interesting character. This is my own opinion, as well as others that I gathered from friends, so I might have some lukewarm or even hot takes here. When deciding to roll for a character, I have a mental rubric I fill out. What is it that this character can add to my account in terms of utility and function? Is the role they bring something that I'm lacking in? I'm currently the max adventure rank, and I have a healthy amount of characters I can use for nearly every situation. Next, do I like this character's aesthetics? Is their drip immaculate? Do I love their voice and their quips? If I pull for this character, I'll be playing them for a long while, so naturally I have to enjoy what they look and sound like. Do I even like this character from a personality standpoint? Most importantly, how far am I willing to go for this character? If I lose the 50-50 in the gacha, would I be willing to use my guarantee on them? Do I wait for a rerun? Do I pull for their weapon? Do I spend money? Most characters function without constellations or their signature weapons just fine, but their power ceiling increases dramatically with both, in the case of, say, Hu Tao and even Wriothesley. I personally don't ever roll for cons, and weapons tend to be on the lower priority for me. If I like the character enough, I'll roll for it, but weapons are always flex pieces to me. Those pulls tend to happen on reruns if I can help it. Lastly, if I pull for this character now, am I okay with potentially not getting a new one in the next patch? Murphy's Law and gacha go hand in hand, so I need to be okay with potentially sacrificing a new unit in the near future. Usually, if I like a character's design, kit, voice, and personality, I'm more than willing to pull that trigger. I'm super easy to please. I try not to spend money as much as I can, and can get away with not buying packs most of the time. Weapons come on reruns, like I said, and constellations are not worth it to me. I am, popping my collar a little bit here, the proud owner of my Inazuma national decks, so I have every Inazuma character currently. So every time a new Inazuma character comes out, I feel the burning need, if you will, to roll for them. So usually, if I see an Inazuma character, all of this kind of scoring system kind of goes right out of the window, and I'm just like, all right, time to roll. So I asked around in my circles to get a pulse check on this topic. The friends I asked usually feel the same. They'd be willing to pull for a character if they like their design and personality, and honestly, that's all they need. Some of my friends with more disposable income just like to collect in this game, and some of the criteria I listed just doesn't apply to them. An interesting response I got was that if they like the character enough, They'd be willing to try a new playstyle, even if it's not their cup of tea. Some of my friends won't roll for weapons, and some of my friends don't even spend money on this game, which means that they have to be extra careful with their primos. I know people with C6 5-stars who do it just to do it. What I'm getting at is that every player will value a character differently. Your trash may be another man's treasure, and vice versa. Finally, coming back to Shenyan, let's see how many boxes she ticked for me. Oh. You know what? Give me an old hag who looks like Bayonetta, is super prideful, and is very pretty, and I'll be at her beck and call. Shenyan occupies a very interesting spot in Genshin Impact right now. When she was initially revealed, I thought she'd be a niche support. Maybe she'd be a character that people would roll for to test out her weird playstyle and then forget about afterwards. I was so glad to be wrong, because Shenyan opens up so many possibilities for team compositions. Because of this, I kind of struggle to call her a niche character. If anything, Shenyan commits the only sin a limited 5-star can commit. She's expensive. Let's take a closer look at her. Shenyan is an anemo healer that buffs and enables plunging attacks. There are very few units in Genshin that rely exclusively on plunge attacks for their damage output, but every character comes with the ability to do it. The Genshin devs felt that this playstyle was largely neglected for a long time, so they wanted to design a unit that works well with it. The result is a Swiss Army knife support character. Shenyan can lower enemy resistance with Viridescent Venerer, use Thrilling Tales to buff your main carry, heal, and also beef up your plunge numbers. And boy, she is a blast to play in the overworld too. Setups that were theorized to be good turned out to be great, and you can get really silly with the other ones. There will also be even more teams and characters in the future that will love Shenyan's support ability. Her drawbacks are that she requires some expensive supports to truly shine, and she has big energy needs. Additionally, rolling for a support character like this may not be worth it if you're lacking firepower elsewhere. She also lacks the crowd control that animal units are known for, but with that much utility out of the box, it's hard to be pressed about it. She's definitely a unit that will stand a test of time, and I'm really happy that I invested in her. My wallet, however, feels differently. That being said though, there are players who are disappointed with Shenyan, and I think that's fair. We were teased with her character design in last year's Lantern Rite, and I think this sparked a lot of excitement. Once that spark turned into a blaze, players built expectations and shared ideas for what she could play like. So naturally, if she falls short of these expectations, players are upset. A lack of crowd control in an animal unit is a huge drawback, especially in Spiral Abyss. On top of that, if you don't care for the plunge playstyle, then the biggest part of her gimmick and her kit is useless to you. Being upset that a character that you were excited for isn't what you wanted is a fair thing to feel, and players were sharing their discontent with this once we saw her kit properly. If this is not how you enjoy playing Genshin Impact, then that's not something I can take away from you. What's hard to ignore is the notion that Shenyan is useless or not worth rolling for given how she turned out. There are no useless characters in Genshin Impact. She has proven herself more than useful now that her banner is over, and even more so with how she's breathed life into older units. I'm gonna point at the stands when I make this call, but I strongly think Shenyan will continue to be relevant, especially as we get more units who love doing big plunges. If I turn out to be wrong, you guys are all free to point and laugh at me in the comment section below. Anyway, enough about Mother. Let's finally talk about Spiral Abyss. Spiral Abyss is a domain that opens up once the player hits AR 20. It's a series of challenge rooms with 12 floors that really throws everything and the kitchen sink at the player. To fully clear it, the player must defeat waves of enemies within a strict time limit. Getting 3 stars on a floor means that the player completed it and can reap all the rewards. This means that Spiral Abyss truly tests the player's understanding of Genshin's finer mechanics. There are also specific effects on different floors, which means that certain characters should be used over others. The player can also pick blessings to give them the upper hand. Because this is a challenge domain, you're not allowed to eat or revive characters. It's encouraged to bring a sustain unit because the player, again, will be engaged in longer battles. As the player ascends the Spiral Abyss, Genshin begins to divide floors into 2 halves. This means that the player now needs 2 well-built teams in order to fully clear both sides of the floor. This does require that the player roll the gacha to get new characters to fill out support roles they might be lacking in. Building characters for this game mode is very time-consuming, but once your support backbone is done, it does pay off. Clearing the first 8 floors of Spiral Abyss unlocks the Abyssal Moonspire, the hardest content the game has to offer. I think this is the true test of the player's understanding of Genshin Impact. This includes things like expert stamina management, knowledge of a party's optimal rotation to deal out the most damage, and great finely tuned artifacts, to name a few. A quote-unquote good Abyss team will feature a well-oiled machine of characters that are built to bring out the best in another. In a race against time, this is extremely important. You'll be constantly applying pressure, funneling energy to your party, buffing your units, and rotating between all of your characters. Abyss can be really fun when all of your units are working in concert like this. It feels very rewarding to see all of your hard work pay off too. The rewards for floor 9 through 12 reset twice a month, and the effects of some floors change depending on what the patch calls for. This means that the player is encouraged to roll and build new characters to help them clear Spiral Abyss, but it's not super necessary. Existing characters will help a ton, but because the enemies also change in these floors, strategies won't stay the same forever. But there are a lot of strategies and characters that will remain dominant, which is what forms the metagame. Shielders like Zhongli bring a lot to the table because they allow for more leeway in combat. His shield can hold up to most things, so you don't have to worry about taking many hits or dodging and consuming stamina. Hyper carry comps are still the old reliable and can be used to clear Abyss as pretty efficiently as possible. Freeze teams and taser teams still work too. Do 36-star Spiral Abyss means to prove that you're him. It's doable, but it's not easy, especially when the later floors keep throwing bosses and enemies with so much HP. In the original cut of the script, I had described my indifference towards 36-starring Spiral Abyss as something that I was just not excited or interested about, despite the fact that I have these characters with these like super highly tweaked builds. And I kind of hand-waved it and I was a little dismissive about it. So I actually went ahead and tried to 36-star Spiral Abyss today. I spent half the day that I should have been doing editing work for this video trying to 36-star Spiral Abyss, and I had made it to as far as 35 stars. I could not pass the DPS check for the perpetual mechanical array, and it was driving me up the wall. I spent like maybe 4 hours trying to clear that one specific star, and I had ultimately gave up, leaving the 35 stars on the table. I had felt like really frustrated because I had felt that all the time that I'd put into this game or tweaking these builds and building these characters just wasn't reflecting on my performance in Spiral Abyss, and truthfully I had to make this video eventually, so I ended up just leaving that on the table. But my hats are eternally off to the people who do this regularly because I feel like I just don't have the patience for it. But generally, bringing a healer means that you have to sacrifice a valuable party slot in Spiral Abyss, so they tend to get a little neglected in terms of forming that metagame strategy. You have to do more than just heal. In most scenarios, I feel like having a shielder is much more important. And again, since this game mode is the main reason why you finally optimize your characters, addressing their energy needs and their crit ratios, it would make sense that you try to optimize your teams as much as possible. But man, the artifact system in Genshin Impact is a blessing and a curse. I like min-maxing because I'm insane, so being able to decide on how I build these characters is pretty fun for me. There are commonly decided quote-unquote best builds for characters, but the real fun in the artifact system is the DIY nature of it. It may be a bit hard to gauge what's a good artifact from the get-go, but once you get a feel for it, it's a ton of fun. You can equip any of these accessories on whatever unit, and as long as you've got 2 or 4 pieces for the effect, the build will work. So for example, even if a character is a DPS, you can flex them into a support role if you want to get real funky with it. Yanfei has a kit that's completely oriented towards dealing damage, but her 4th constellation lets her take up a new role. What it does is that it creates a shield based on her HP stat. You can completely forgo her DPS if you want and build her as a support shielder and have that work out for you. Tank Faye isn't optimal, but I think it's a ton of fun. This build opens up a lot of team options that she didn't have before. Speaking of team options, this is where the DPS Barbara memes come into play. If built with a loadout that complements it, Barbara, the sweetheart healer of your party, can become your main DPS. Will she out DPS characters with kits and numbers made for it? No, absolutely not. But is it funny? Yes, it's hilarious. That's the real fun for Genshin. I did rock a DPS Barbara kit for a really long time. I still do, but I'm currently in between 2 sets. I'm struggling to get anything usable for the set I want her to run. This is what I really don't like about Genshin's artifact system. Trying to optimize anything feels like throwing a dart at a board that's always spinning and is also on fire. Artifact drops are completely random. Farming an artifact domain means it's a complete crapshoot as to whether or not you get the artifact that you want because the drops are split between 2 sets. If you do get the set that you want, the piece of the set that drops is also random. Additionally, the main stat of the artifact is also random. But wait, there's more. Each artifact also drops with a completely random set of substats. Depending on who you're building and what you need the piece for, a lot of these will just have completely useless stats. Also, guess what? When you level that artifact, it's going to randomly increase one of the 4 stats. You can either get extremely lucky and have the artifact roll into your desired stats, or you can get put in the dumpster. That means you have to fight at least 5 levels of RNG just to build your character. You can farm forever trying to optimize your sets for Spiral Abyss or even for funsies and never get your golden drop. You want to know something funny? I farmed the Pale Flame domain, trying to get the best possible artifacts for my Eula. I couldn't get a crit damage circlet to drop for the life of me, and once it finally did, this happened. You want to know how much I farmed this domain? According to Genshin's web anniversary event, it was like 400 times. It's so tragic I can't help but laugh. Eventually you just reach a point where you just give up and accept that your character is fine as is and they're perfectly usable despite any kind of energy imbalances or crit ratios. I myself am extremely picky with my artifacts, so I just kind of throw out whatever I think that could be bad. If I see that def substat, more often than not, I'm fucking tossing it. The probability of it rolling into your undesired stats is actually pretty high. There's an equation that you can use to calculate it, or you can just look at it and think, this is gonna be trash, and throw it away. But there was a point where I did nothing but log on, farm artifacts, and refuse to use some of my characters that were unbuilt until I was satisfied with how they came out. There was still a lot of content that I have to do in the game, but I felt like I wasn't enjoying it because I had put this weird restriction on myself. And because of that, I felt like I was really unhappy with a game that I truly loved. That is, until Eula finally came back around. I don't think my enjoyment of this game is strictly tied to the characters I pull, but getting a new character you waited ages for and finally getting to use them goes a long way. If I had listened to everyone who told me not to roll for Eula, I would have missed out on some of the most fun I had with Genshin in a long time. Eula swings her claymore with the determination of a baseball player that needs to secure that game-winning home run. Her burst has the destructive force of a freight train and completely annihilates anything it collides with. Her numbers are so silly, and it helps that I have a lot of support characters that pair nicely with her. I have a ton of fun just seeing how quickly I can dumpster bosses or how high I can get her burst to go. Eula's a bit of a divisive pick because her physical damage oriented kit demands that she run specific supports, and physical damage is in a bit of a tough spot right now. There's not really a whole lot of support or love for it. She also has the issue of killing enemies way too quickly, missing out on stacks from the burst, or even whiffing the burst entirely. While I won't deny that she has these issues, I still think that she's a ton of fun to play. I found myself just logging in and enjoying the game again, not for any kind of farming goal, but to explore and vibe with it again. I started to build and use characters I haven't used in a while. Kuching's another one of my favorite characters in this game, and I've heavily invested for her. I even rolled for Mistblitter for her, but I don't get to use her all that often. She hasn't aged as gracefully compared to some of the other characters. But guess who got a second win with Dendro? I found myself using Kuching a lot more in Dendro teams, and her damage surprised me. Heck, Dia's widely regarded to be one of the worst characters in this game, but I still built and used her. I'm a bit biased because she has Beautiful Joe's Red Hot 100, but honestly, she's so fun. Her numbers might not be very high and her energy issues are kind of terrible, but if you like her, use her. Fuck it. C6 your Bennett. Build the Chi-Chi you keep getting cons for. Use your Shinyan for that silly gimmick build. Rip those Inazuma kicks with Heizo. Whatever you do in Genshin, do it because you love it. For me, playing my favorites is a big part of why I love this game and how I learned to love it again. Fontaine's content update sealed the deal for me, and it rekindled my love for Genshin Impact, my old flame, which is crazy because I play this game every day and I've seen so much of it already. It never fails to surprise me just how much the Genshin devs can keep a 4-year-old game feeling fresh by adding new ways to explore. It may seem like we lost the plot a little bit here when talking about Barbara, but I assure you that this video is still about her. I just wanted to examine all of these topics through the lens of my favorite character. And by that notion, this video isn't just about Barbara, it's about everyone, honestly. I dedicate this one to everyone who enjoys playing a character who is quote-unquote low tier, or not considered as good as certain characters, or seen in a certain way that kind of holds them back in the eyes of other people. I think having a favorite in this game is more than valid, and dedicating all your love, time, and effort into these characters, investing in them, triple crowning them, is what makes Genshin so special to so many people, and hell, it's what makes the game special to me. It is a character-driven game, first and foremost, in my opinion, and I love seeing and exploring and learning more about these characters. Stopping to smell the roses and enjoy the game in this manner helped me love it so much more. So why not? Let's take Barbara on another adventure. There's still so many dazzling places to see, puzzles to solve, and battles to brave. We're gonna need a healer, and who better than Genshin's best girl? And that's going to bring us to the end of today's video. Guys, if you made it to the end of this one and really enjoyed it, let me know in the comments down below. I really appreciate all of your time and patience today. I would also like to hear from you. Who is your favorite Genshin Blorbo? I feel like everyone has their own unique answer for their own very specific reasons, and I would just like to hear from you guys more, so let me know in the comments down below who's your favorite Genshin character. Obviously, you guys know how I feel about Barbara by now. Also, you may have noticed the audio quality sounds pretty good for the videos too. Got myself a fancy new setup. Got myself the big boy streaming microphone, so hopefully the audio quality does reflect that as well. I'll be using this microphone from now on for every video, so very excited about that one. Speaking about things I'm also very excited about, I would like to extend my special thanks today to the artists who had helped make this possible. Of course, the additional artwork done by some dear friends of the channel. Thank you, Suwa Studios. Thank you to Belle. Thank you to Zadora as well for all the little blorbos that you have seen on the screen. Big appreciate everything that they do for me. I would like to extend my special thanks as well to Firestia for providing all of the memes that you have seen first and foremost in the video, so the Stonks one, and then the Barbara Unchained, as I call it. But also, she provided the thumbnail composition and also the thumbnail art for this video. I think she really captured Barbara's healing, pure-hearted idol energy in the key art for the video, and also she portrayed the channel mascot Himawari as this sniveling idol otaku based off the Ryamu Idol Master card, so I think she did an absolute bang-up job, so please be sure to send some love her way. And with that, I'll be signing off, so be sure to take care of yourselves, stay gold, and I'll catch you next time.